I'm going to show you how to make spaghetti bolognese from scratch, including the sauce and the pasta. If you've never made pasta before, this is a great recipe to start with because it's really simple to do. You just need a few basic ingredients. And if you don't have all the ingredients, you can find them at your local grocery store. The first thing we need to do is get our ingredients ready. So grab your ingredients list. We are going to need some spaghetti, of course, because that's what the dish is called. Spaghetti bolognese. First thing, grab your box of spaghetti and we're going to read the back of it. It says to cook it in boiling water for 8 to 10 minutes or until al dente. Al dente means that when you bite into it, it's not quite chewy, but it's not quite soft either. So you want to go towards the softer side, but not too soft, because you're going to be putting it in the sauce and it's going to be cooking a little bit more. So once it's al dente, then you're done. We're going to drain the water and set it aside. Now, while that's cooking, let's work on our sauce. For our sauce, we're going to need some ground beef. It doesn't say on the recipe how much ground beef to use. So what I did was I grabbed the entire package. It was 1 pound, and I put it right into my pan. Now we're going to add some chopped onion. Now I'm using half of what the recipe calls for because I don't like onion very much. So I'm only going to be using half of the onion, but feel free to use the whole onion if you like onions. We're also going to add some garlic, and again, I'm using half of what the recipe calls for. So we'll be using 2 cloves. So now we're going to turn our stove on to medium heat. Once it's nice and hot, we're going to add some salt and pepper. The recipe calls for black pepper, but I'm also adding salt because I think that's going to help bring out the flavors a little bit better. And now we're just going to mix everything together and cook it until the meat is no longer pink. This should only take about 5 or 6 minutes. After about 5 minutes, the meat should be brown and no longer pink. Once it's fully cooked through, we're going to turn our heat off and get the meat out of the pan. We're going to discard the grease, and now we're going to add our tomato products. First, we're going to add our tomato paste, and now we're going to add our crushed tomatoes. Again, I'm only using half of what the recipe calls for because I don't really like tomatoey things, but feel free to use the whole amount if you like. And then we're going to add our chopped tomatoes. Again, I'm only using half of what the recipe calls for because I don't really like tomatoey things, but feel free to use the whole amount if you like. And now we're going to turn our heat back on to medium heat and bring everything to a boil. While that's coming to a boil, let's go ahead and chop up our carrots and celery. I'm only using half of what the recipe calls for because I don't really like celery that much. But feel free to use the whole amount if you like. And I'm only going to be using 1 carrot because I don't really like carrots that much. But feel free to use 2 if you like. So we'll add our carrots and celery into the sauce and mix it around. Once it starts boiling, we're going to turn the heat down to low and simmer it uncovered for 30 minutes. Now every once in a while, you're just going to want to mix it to make sure nothing sticks to the bottom of the pan. After 30 minutes, we're going to turn our heat off and get our sauce off the pan. We're just going to set it to the side for now. And now we need to work on the pasta water. So we're going to grab our pot of boiling water and we're going to continue to boil it until the pasta is done. So we'll come back to this in just a second. We're going to add our pasta into the boiling water and then we're going to cover it and let it cook for about 10 minutes or until al dente. Remember, al dente means that when you bite into it, it's not quite chewy, but it's not quite soft either. So you want to go towards the softer side, but not too soft because the pasta will continue to cook in the sauce. So while the pasta is cooking, let's go ahead and work on our garnish. We're going to be garnishing with some fresh parsley, but you can use dried if you don't have any. Fresh parsley has a stronger flavor. Dried parsley has a more mild flavor. So if you do use dried, you might want to add just a little bit more of it. So we'll just chop up some parsley, set it aside for now. We're also going to need some Parmesan cheese. We are only going to need about 1/4 of the amount that's in this container, but feel free to use more if you like. And then we're going to need some butter. Now I'm only using half of what the recipe calls for because I didn't really like butter that much. But feel free to use the whole amount if you like. And then finally, we're going to need some milk. I'm also only going to be using half of what the recipe calls for because I don't really like milk that much. But feel free to use the whole amount if you like. Our pasta should be done cooking by now. So we're going to drain the water and then we're going to add it right into our sauce. Once it's in there, we're going to mix it around and we're going to let it sit for about 5 minutes. This will allow the pasta to absorb some of that sauce and get coated in it. After 5 minutes, we're going to turn our heat on to low, and now we're going to add our beef that we cooked earlier. We'll just mix it in there, and then we'll taste it. Now, the recipe says to season it with salt and pepper, but I think it's seasoned well enough already, so I'm not going to add anything else. But feel free to add salt and pepper if you want to. After that, we're going to turn our heat off, and now we're going to serve it up. We're going to put some of it in a bowl. Now we're going to add our garnish, so we'll sprinkle some parsley on top. We'll also add some Parmesan cheese, and then we'll add a little bit of butter and milk. We'll do the same thing again. We'll sprinkle some parsley on top. We'll add some Parmesan cheese, butter, and milk. And now we're ready to eat. That was so freaking good. I love it when the noodles are all covered in sauce. It looks so delicious. I hope you enjoyed watching me cook this recipe as much as I enjoyed making it for you.